Welcome to Walpole Five-0. I'm Chief John Carmichael. Today is January 23rd, 2018, and I want to congratulate the New England Patriots on the AFC Championship win this past weekend. I'll get into some of the calls that we had because Walpole does get busy when 65,000 people come spilling out of the stadium and essentially into the streets of Walpole. So get into a couple of calls there. Want to mention Vivian and Natasha. Vivian brought in some coffee from Dunkin' Donuts the other day for the Walpole police officers that were on duty on the day shift. As a result, gave her a positive ticket for doing that. The nice deed that she did, and her and her mom, Natasha, came in, and we really appreciate that. And I hope Vivian enjoys her time at the movies because she got a movie pass. Quickly, just want to mention the Walpole Police Department will be requesting a couple of warrant articles to go on Springtown meeting this year through the Board of Selectmen. Essentially what they do is they will accept part of the Municipal Modernization Act, and what this does is we're asking for reductions in speed limits in thickly settled or business districts down to 25 miles an hour from 30 miles an hour, and to also establish what we call safety zones. And the safety zones will be areas that we can identify as being areas that should be 20 miles an hour. So we even reduced more in areas that are like near schools, sharp turns, that kind of thing. Places where we know from data that we've had a high amount of crashes and that kind of thing. And maybe as a result we can kind of reduce some of the motor vehicle crashes that we have in Walpole. So, a little loud. So essentially, on the Mass General Law 9017, it's what speed is reasonable, and police officers can stop vehicles when they go above what's greater and reasonable over that speed limit. Thickly settled areas are always 30 miles per hour, business districts, that kind of thing. And then 9018, section 9018 is basically the posted speed limits that you see. So if it's 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, 55 miles per hour, those are all speed limits that are approved by the state, and there has to be all kinds of traffic analysis and everything done in order to set those speed limits. So this here, we're going to be able to give the Board of Selectmen, who are the road commissioners, the ability to reduce either some or all of the thickly settled areas and business districts. And I think it will do us justice as far as reducing crashes in Walpole. So we're looking forward to that. Getting into the log, going back to January 16th, Officer Doherty stopped a motor vehicle for a registration violation. As he did, he noticed that there was a strong odor of burnt marijuana emanating from the vehicle. While speaking with the operator, that person displayed signs of recent use of marijuana, and as a result, he asked that individual, gave them an exit order. He initiated several roadside assessment checks, and as a result of that, he felt that operator demonstrated a lack of mental clarity, that they were unable to follow instructions correctly, and ultimately he came to the conclusion that this person was impaired due to using marijuana, and as a result placed that individual under arrest for operating under the influence of drugs. There was also 4 other kids in the vehicle. This operator was 18 years of age, obviously below the 21-year-old threshold, and there was also alcohol inside of that vehicle. So Officer Doherty, using his discretion, made that arrest. On January 16th, there was a crash, and we have ultimately identified the suspect. This was a crash that occurred on Thursday morning, and the motor struck a home in North Walpole. It caused significant structural damage to the home. After that vehicle struck the home, it fled the scene, and as a result, when officers got there, there was no witnesses, and we started to collect some of items of evidentiary value, and we did retrieve one piece of debris that did provide some identifying characteristics. It revealed that the vehicle involved was a Chevrolet Sonic at a 2011 to 2017 model, and that's pretty much all we had to go on. And I credit Officer Lagoa for scanning that area and finding that one little piece of evidence that was able to at least tell us what type of vehicle that was. And then The media did pick up on this a little bit and helped us get the word out that this was a hit and run, that there was structural damage. And as a result of that, we did have some witnesses come forward. One witness who was very helpful in providing some identifying information of that vehicle. We were able to establish a photographic lineup of potential suspects, and that individual was picked out of a lineup. And ultimately, the officers and detectives worked very hard for about 24 hours straight on this, and they were able to locate the vehicle at Logan Airport in a parking garage with significant front-end damage. And while doing that, they also learned that the operator of that vehicle had rented that car and was getting on an airplane to go back to New Mexico where they live. But as a result, anyways, Officer Toland did interview that individual, Detective Toland, and they admitted that they had been driving that vehicle and struck the home. And we're very grateful for the officers for their abilities in following up on this, but also very grateful to the witnesses for coming forward. We can't do this job alone. We need them, and we really appreciate that. So going forward, really this is going to help this poor family whose home was struck, and they may not have had, getting the ability to take care of that damage if we didn't track this person down. So good job on that all around. An assault on January 16th, Officer Parlon and Kevlich responded to a location for a past assault. It was on a teacher by a student. Officer Hart also responded, and Officer Hart's going to handle that matter. A summons, Detective Benner conducted a motor vehicle stop. This was an individual from Waltham. They were unlicensed, and as a result, they will issue a summons for operating unlicensed. In arrest, Detective Toland conducted a motor vehicle stop, and as a result, he arrested the individual for no license and expired registration, and that was mostly based on their past history with this type of thing, and Detective Toland decided to arrest on that. Summons, Officer Bethany and Crown conducted a motor vehicle stop on Route 1. They were going to summons an individual from North Providence for operating unregistered and uninsured motor vehicle, and they had to tow that vehicle as it was uninsured. Harassment, there was an individual reporting harassment from another community. This was ongoing, and as a result, we did speak to these individuals about seeking a harassment prevention order. As I've mentioned in the past, those are orders similar to a restraining order, but a little bit different in how the process works. And there has to be 3 reported incidents to the police, and that we have spoken to all of the parties involved. Officer Henneberry did this investigation, and we'll be looking into this further. An arrest, this was at MCI Walpole. Individual walked in to visit. They had an outstanding warrant from Boston PD. Officer Thayer and Bethany went up there and they placed that individual from South Boston under arrest for a warrant. It was out of Boston Police Department, and it was for criminal harassment, which was similar to the last call we just spoke about. Unwanted person, funeral home requested that an unwanted person be removed. Officers went down there, they did remove that person, and we did provide transportation home in that case. Criminal harassment, another individual reported, came to the station. There was harassment by an individual from another community. There was a previous reports filed as a result, and we did conduct an investigation, learned that there was some other issues with harassment. Officer Lagoa took this case. He's going to charge that individual with criminal harassment, and then we also called that individual and told them to stop calling. And in the meantime, we'll get a harassment prevention order. Neighbor dispute, officers responded to Sector 1, it was East Walpole, speak to a resident regarding an ongoing neighbor dispute. After further investigation, we found some other matters going on there, but in any event, the officers will be following up with this specific case. An altercation, Detective Benner observed 2 men in front of the Bank of America. They were squaring off and about to get into a fight. Detective Benner exited his vehicle and was able to intervene and stop that fight from taking place. And this was apparently over another individual who had ripped off one of the victims of money, and that's how that started. A well-being check. Officer Foley conducted a well-being check on Hilltop. There was an individual, they contacted the DCF hotline, and the juvenile called because they were asked to help carry in groceries. And as a result, officers went up there and spoke to that individual, and peace restored. Shoplifting. Individual committed a shoplifting at Cumberland Farms on Main Street. There was 2 individuals involved in this. As a result of this, both individuals will receive a letter of disinvite, which is essentially a trespass notice not to come back, and they will be summons against one of the individuals for shoplifting. An assault, Officer Pylon and Kevlich, they responded to a location for past assault and battery on a teacher by a student, and this, again, referred to Officer Hart. Summons, Officer Bieberman summoning an individual from Plainville for operating a motor vehicle with a suspended license, and this was following a motor vehicle stop. An arrest, this was conducted by Officer Doherty. There was an individual pulled into the CVS Plaza. Officer Doherty noticed that individual and had knowledge that their license was suspended. However, these 3 individuals exited that vehicle and went into the plaza someplace. A short time later, Officer Doherty did see those individuals again. He knew that this person was operating with a suspended license, and also that another individual that was with them had an arrest warrant out for them. And as a result, he approached with other officers and placed the operator under arrest for driving with a suspended license, but also placed not only 1 but 2 other individuals under arrest for warrants. One individual of Norwood had a default warrant, and during that encounter he was also found to be in possession of a Class B and Class B substance. He did have remnants of crystal methamphetamine on their person, which is, it's uncommon in Massachusetts, in our region, to see a lot of crystal methamphetamine. It's mostly, you'll see it out in the Midwest. Heroin, unfortunately, and fentanyl is more prevalent around here. But we have seen this lately. One of the trends we are seeing as far as drugs is we're seeing more cocaine and more crystal methamphetamine. So it just as a drug trend to be aware of. But these 3 individuals were placed under arrest and transported to the police station. And as I mentioned, 1 for a suspended license, 1 for a default warrant, and additional drug charges, and the female with a warrant. The next call is a drug protective custody / overdose, and this ended up being being the female individual that was arrested. Apparently that individual had consumed some type of drugs or ingested drugs prior to the encounter with the police, and ultimately that caught up to them when they were in lockup and started to show signs of an overdose as well as some other medical issues. And as a result, we took this individual from arrest into protective custody under the new drug statute, the protective custody drug statute, transported them to Norwood Hospital so that they could be evaluated and make sure that everything was okay there. Obviously, the arrest later on, it's an arrest warrant. That's not going to go away, but at least this person was taken to the hospital and was safe. And I credit Sergeant O'Connell and Officer Slavin, Michelle Slavin, who was in the detention center in the cell block, and she made frequent checks and noticed that this person was suffering from some type of a condition. So they did a great job on that, and that could have obviously ended up in tragedy if they hadn't been paying such close attention. So good job there. January 22nd, Officer Madden and Haber responded to Longview Farm. There was an individual that was being violent and uncontrollable. They were deemed to be a threat to some of the other people, so we had to remove that person from the premises. Traffic control, Officer Slavin, Sergeant Becker, some of the rest of the shift responded down to South Walpole for traffic control. This was following the Patriots game. Obviously, there was a large amount of foot traffic and motor vehicle traffic, a lot of volume of motor vehicles coming out from the stadium. This is a situation where I have just recently again asked the stadium and asked Foxborough for additional detail officers, at least 2, bare minimum 2, to help out after the games, because what happens is we have details down there prior to the game, but we have no coverage afterwards, and we end up having our whole shift down there trying to mitigate the problems that are coming out of the stadium. It's unacceptable. We're trying to get them to accept that and make sure that Walpole isn't left out of the loop as far as making sure that we can mitigate traffic and foot traffic. And as I'll get into now, there was, right after this, as we were down there was a disturbance. This was over on Route 1 or near Route 1. It was an individual, 26-year-old from West Bridgewater, that was placed under arrest after officers observed him slamming a female to the ground, getting on top of them and assaulting them. And as a result, that person was placed under arrest, highly intoxicated after leaving the game, and just an ancillary issue that we have to deal with. And as I said, because of the shift, our shift had to address this. Shortly after that call, another disturbance in South Walpole. Officer Haber witnessed another assault and battery where this was a female who was swinging with closed fists towards an individual multiple times. Officer Haber moved in. He placed a 30-year-old female from Needham under arrest for assault and battery. And again, this is what we see when people drink too much up there, and then they kind of flow out into the neighborhoods and everything, and this type of thing happens. And this is what we want to be able to use these other 2 officers to help us mitigate and make sure that the rest of the town is adequately covered. Motor vehicle, Officer Giblin conducted a motor vehicle stop. This had a revoked registration for insurance, and he towed that vehicle and issued them a citation. Summons, Patrolman Henneberry conducted a motor vehicle stop. This individual had a suspended driver's license, and that operator was summoned as well. We're keeping on with that trend of operating on license, suspended license, revoked license. You can't drive. When you don't have a license, you cannot drive. Next one is a motor vehicle crash with an operating under the influence of liquor arrest. This individual was traveling on Kendall Street, lost control and crashed. Due to the injuries that this person sustained, the officers chose to get the ambulance down there. They were transported to Norwood Hospital. And it turns out, as part of the officers' investigation on scene, they learned that the operator had been using Zoloft, which is an anti-anxiety medication, but also drinking vodka on top of that. And if you even look at drugs such as Zoloft, they should never be mixed with alcohol. And as a result, that obviously had a negative effect on this operator. Shouldn't be driving a motor vehicle and cause that crash. Emotionally disturbed person, Section 12. This was an individual having a mental health crisis. Officers responded and assisted that person in getting to Norwood Hospital for evaluation. Fraud, individual reports that a large sum of money was fraudulently removed from a money market account. Officer Crown filed a report, and he's conducting the follow-up investigation on this one here. An arrest, officers went to Sector 3. This was for a substance abuse commitment, or a Section 35. That's an involuntary commitment for substance use. When we got there, the officers encountered the individual, but they adamantly refused to be taken into custody to be transported to court. As a result, that individual at one point appeared to try and grab a putty knife. The officers had to move in. It became physical. Officer Bethany did deploy a taser and dry stunned the individual. And as a result, that person was taken into custody. And now not only the issue of custody with substance abuse commitment, but also for assault and battery on the police officers who responded there. And with the intent to help this individual, because our role when serving we call it a warrant of apprehension, our role when we do these is to assist that person from getting from point A to point B, being court, and then so that that person can get some treatment and hopefully deal with the substance use disorder that they may be suffering from. So that's what that's for. And unfortunately, this one had some other twists and turns to it and ends up in an arrest. But in any event, that's it. That's all we have for today, January 23rd, 2018. And I'm Chief John Carmichael. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.